So today we're going to talk about something that's probably a little bit different, maybe even a little bit more exotic than what we've been talking about the past couple of days, because it hasn't really infiltrated casual games in the way that it has MMOs. So just want to introduce myself. My name is RADTKE. I'm the CEO of a Singapore-based company called First Meta. And First Meta is a legitimate exchange for virtual currencies. It was actually founded in Singapore, and initially it serviced Second Life, so allowed people to, it was financial services inside of virtual worlds. They also launched an exchange, and now we work with several different types of virtual currencies that we let players trade. And we do this legally with the issuers of the currency. They also participate in the revenue created from trading. So that's First Meta, but today we're really going to talk about where did RMT come from, how has it happened historically, and kind of where is it going. So it goes back all the way to the mid-1990s as MMOs appeared kind of in their modern form as we see them today. And the first kind of trading of virtual assets were really game accounts. So, I had assessed wealth or access, credentials, status inside a game. And my friend was like, I want that, and I'll pay you 20 bucks for it. And I gave him my username and password, and this was the first type of real money trade of a virtual asset. In late 90s, you have Ultima Online becoming kind of the most prolific MMO at the time. And the black market arose almost immediately. Literally, there was no lag. As soon as there were virtual currencies, there were people trading them. And initially, this was done on eBay. And then, this became such a big business and such a pain for the game companies that their currencies were being traded and circulated outside of their control, that they lobbied for eBay, and eBay ended up shutting down all virtual goods auctions in 2001. The only thing that happened is people just went other places to buy them and other places to sell them. So the business then went to a lot of the black market providers, like IGE is kind of a notorious one. So in 2003, Entropia Universe, which was a virtual world, launched, and it launched with RMT. So there was a two-way exchange for its virtual currency. You could buy it and sell it amongst other players for real money. And of course, 2004, WoW launches, and WoW Gold quickly becomes the most dominantly traded virtual currency. And you might have heard about the phenomenon of gold farming in China, where they literally have like operations of people gaming all day to accumulate gold, which then they sell for real money. So now this was a huge pain in Blizzard's neck, and they've done a lot over the years to combat it, relatively unsuccessfully. So 2009 comes, something majorly happened in kind of the legal aspect of real money trading, RMT. Korea's Supreme Court, so many of you know this, being the gaming industry, Korea is probably the most sophisticated virtual goods market. And the Supreme Court essentially said that, if a user puts time, energy, effort, and money into earning this virtual wealth, that it actually belongs to them like their real property. And the Korean government recognizes virtual assets as real property. So if it belongs to you, you can sell it. Just like if you buy shoes and you want to sell those shoes to your friends, that is exactly how it is recognized in Korea, which is also kind of the largest per capita market for RMT. The Chinese government in 2010 started regulating the business of virtual currency trading. I think this is an example of what we'll start to see in globally as the secondary market becomes larger, is governments regulating it, which I think is fair, because this isn't a gaming company, right? This is a financial services company, even though it's a peripheral of the gaming industry. So last year, the World Bank actually looked into this. They published a report on virtual economies, and this is the first kind of respected estimate of the size of the secondary market of virtual goods trading, and they estimated at about $3 billion globally. I think that's conservative. So how big is this market today? I think you'll get different answers from different people. It depends what you consider to be a virtual currency, and that's a whole nother discussion. But as we understand it, as we speak of it, it's essentially a $4 billion business, which is actually a big part of the whole virtual goods industry, if you think about it like that. And it's primarily taking place in MMOs and virtual worlds, and it's growing very quickly at about 25% a year. Now, how does this impact mobile and social? Mobile and social trading isn't even factored into this $4 billion number. So we are starting to see it happen. There's a very popular mobile game in Japan that the secondary market for their currency, the volume of trading of their currency related to their game, is $300,000 a day. That's how much of this currency is being traded in a player-to-player aspect on a daily basis. And this is completely illegal in Japan. So, and so that means the game company, this is happening outside of the game company's control. They're not participating any revenue, and I bet you it causes a lot of headaches for them when people don't get their trades delivered, and then they call the game company, and they're like, well, we have no control over this. So mobile and social, we're starting to see activity. In fact, a very big casual game company that I won't mention, but it's public in the United States, you can probably figure out, recently filed a suit against a totally legitimate Korean exchange because currencies of theirs were starting to get traded. So how does it work? I'm just going to really quickly break this down. It's an extremely simple transaction. You have a buyer, and this buyer wants to buy this currency for either cheaper than they can from the game, or it's a type of currency that you can't buy, right? It has to be earned. So the only way to obtain it is on the secondary market if you want to buy it with money. Now you have a seller, they have amassed wealth, they want to get liquidity of this virtual wealth, and here you have a perfect business transaction, right? So the person in the middle, whether it be First Meta or an illegitimate exchange or auction, these are the only people who are now participating in this transaction. But this is really how it should be, right? The publisher and the developer, if their currency is being traded, being circulated, they should really get a piece of the action, right? This is a $4 billion global industry, and today very few publishers are taking place in the secondary market. So I think we can talk about a little bit of who are the players, who are the more prominent names in the industry, and what have they done. You can basically break this down into two categories. Essentially, the white market players that work and serve the B2B part of it. They work with the publishers, and the black market and gray market providers who are just direct to consumer. I think a couple notable names on sort of the white market are PlaySpan. They started as an exchange. They worked directly with the games. They kind of moved into payments, and Visa bought them in 2011 for I think $190 million. LiveGamer also started as a player-to-player marketplace for virtual goods. Symmetrics, they were more on the data and payment side, but they also provided a kind of universal currency that you could trade you could buy with your money and then use it to buy other game currencies. On the black market side, and I guess you can't even call it that anymore today, because in some industries in some countries they're not black market, but IGE, 5173.com. Some of you guys might even have bought currencies from some of these sites before. Item Bay and Item Mania, who have since merged, and Player Auctions. So to give you some concept of scale, Item Bay and Item Mania, who operate out of Korea, this year they'll do well over $1 billion in volume of secondary market virtual goods transactions. So just as now was two companies, now one company, over $1 billion in volume this year. So these are kind of some of the players. So what's getting traded? you know, we're talking about these transactionings occurring, but what's actually getting traded? So only about 20% of trades on the secondary market are items. So you can imagine maybe it's a weapon or a wearable, a cloak of some kind. But this is a very small part of trading. 80% of trades are hard currency. I think that's kind of makes natural sense, right? Because with the currency, you can buy whatever you want. But so the item exchange portion of trading is actually more complex than the currency trading, but it's a very small percent of transactions. And here's just some data. This is a commission, actually. This study was commissioned by PlayStand, and you can see that, you know, a big portion of the money spent was just purely on currency. So this is a question that I always get asked when I tell people that I trade virtual currency. They say, okay, well, what about fraud? I think this industry gets demonized for being like overly fraudulent, but I don't think we experience excessively more fraud than anyone who accepts payments over the internet. But it does happen. We'll talk a little bit about that. So approximately 10%, sometimes north of 10% of all of our transactions are fraudulent in some nature. This couple different types of fraud. Some of you guys will recognize this, right? Friendly fraud or chargebacks. So there's two basic scenarios here. We have friendly fraud where someone actually goes on our site, they put in a buy order, one of our sellers, the exchange completely automated, you know, facilitates the trade of this virtual currency, and then they call their credit card company and they say, oh, I didn't buy that. And, you know, often they side with the credit card company, or PayPal sides with the consumer because we don't have a physical good. And if you're not delivering a physical good, it's hard to track. And so it's just easier for them to side with the consumer. So then they assess those funds for us, right? So we're at a loss. The more interesting, kind of like sexier form of fraud is the laundering. And people who are more familiar with RMT will often say, okay, well, that's just a big money laundering scheme. Well, unfortunately, it's really not that exciting. It's not, you know, it's not the biggest part of fraud we experience, but I will kind of illustrate a scenario here. Essentially, you have someone, maybe in China, maybe in Eastern Europe, who has access to stolen credit card numbers. Apparently, it's quite easy to get access to stolen credit cards, and they use this to buy virtual currency in an environment, in a game environment. And then they come to our exchange and they trade that currency for real money, or they exchange it into another type of currency, and then they go and resell that. So now you've seen they basically, this is the virtual version of stealing a television, putting it in a van, driving down the street, and then selling the TV. It's the selling of stolen property. So other than essentially using stolen credit cards, they also have sites that phish for users' credentials, fake PayPal sites, fake payment sites. Then they get your username and password. They can access your virtual wealth and use our exchange or other exchanges to essentially launder this virtual wealth and exchange it into a fungible currency. And that's why RMT gets associated with fraud, is because it provides liquidity to something that was really never meant to be liquid in the nature that, you know, we think about it. So the next thing I constantly get asked is all of this legal? Like, people often immediately assume that this is illegal, but it's not actually illegal. Well, actually it depends. It depends who you ask and what country you're living in and where you sort of fit into the transaction. So in the United States, there's no actual legislation on the secondary goods trading market. So, you know, no law in any state has been passed saying that you cannot trade a virtual currency, right? So there is no law. The only governing agreement exists between the user and the game provider. And typically, the game publisher has said, you don't own these assets, we just let you use them for your entertainment, but they're not yours. So if they're not yours, you can't sell them. That's when the traditional game company stands on this. So there's been actually several court cases in the private courts where game companies have sued either the exchanges or actual sometimes they'll even try and persecute users, but they've all been settled and they're all private, so no one knows actually what happened in these cases. China, as we mentioned, is regulating this industry, so because the virtual goods business and virtual goods trading is so much more prominent, it's just such a bigger business there, they're a little bit more advanced on the legislative side. As we discussed, in Korea, this is totally legal, and there's actually taxation occurring, legislation occurring around virtual assets, and it's probably where you would go if you wanted to learn the most about the legality and potential implications of legality of virtual goods trading. Japan has typically taken a very hard stance on RMT in games because they want to prevent gambling. They're very strict about gambling, and this is kind of a way where you can take, again, a currency from maybe a gambling type of game and sell it to another person for real money. So this has also caused a lot of headaches for companies like Cree, and there's, I believe, a major litigation taking place right now because of this in Japan. So I'm hoping that gives you sort of some background on how the real money trading industry came unto itself and who's involved and kind of how it occurs. And now I want to kind of, for the second half of this, talk about what's happening now and what are the forces of change, because as everyone here knows, there's been, in the past, I would say 24 to 36 months, there's been huge shifts in the gaming industry. I mean, iOS, Facebook, the obvious things. And I want to talk about how that's going to affect the secondary market for virtual goods. So the first thing doesn't need to be explained in this room because everyone here has been a part of this essentially, but the mass adoption of the free-to-play model. So since now it is the common form of monetization to issue a type of virtual good in type of a game, what you have is just more types of virtual goods and virtual currencies flooding the market. So if you were to tell me that more virtual currencies was going to mean less virtual currency trading, I would say that that was illogical. So I think this is going to be actually create more growth in the secondary market. The interesting part of this is, okay, like how are we going to capture that value? Is a casual mobile game companies going to make the same mistake as the MMOs and try and like fight this and prevent it and try to tell users they can't do what they want? Or are they going to find a way to somehow actually monetize this behavior? Blizzard's Diablo 3. So a lot of you guys are following this. The game recently launched. This is actually huge, this event that's taking place, because Blizzard has been the biggest, one of the biggest opponents of RMT, you know, since it began. I mean, they've taken people to court. They've sometimes canceled thousands of user accounts at a time that were associated with trading. I mean, they really tried to squash it unsuccessfully. With Diablo 3 is coming out with its own RMT auction. So by doing this, they're making a big statement about how the future of RMT is going to look, right? When somebody like Blizzard says, okay, we're done fighting it, we're actually gonna, you know, embrace this activity and let users trade their goods and sell their goods, I think that is extremely meaningful, and I think people in the industry take note. So I want to touch upon this. Can't spend a lot of time on it. I think this could be a complete session unto itself, but I want to talk about Bitcoin. Can I just quickly ask how many people in this room have heard of Bitcoin? The Bitcoin project, okay, decentralized cryptocurrency out of Japan, really interesting. So what is Bitcoin? To me, how I interpret it is Bitcoin is really the coming to fruition of a real virtual currency. It kind of sounds like an oxymoron, a real virtual currency, but it's very real in the sense that you can buy things with it. On and starting to be offline, you can buy things with Bitcoin, and it has no physical expression, and it never will have any type of physical expression. So it is really a true virtual currency. The major difference between Bitcoin and other virtual currencies is that there is no central bank of Bitcoin, right? So like if you issue a virtual currency in your game or World of Warcraft issues wild gold, or the US government issues the US dollar, there's a central bank that issues this currency. With Bitcoin, there is no central bank. So it actually has to be mined, and it gets mined using computing resources. So I want to touch on this because I think this is just another factor in what's going to be a major paradigm shift in how people buy and spend, because there's the formation of these new non-traditional and essentially non-political currencies. More and more ways to pay. So this is just a real basic thing, right? It's getting easier to buy things online, but how does this have anything to do with RMT? Well, you know, Southeast Asia and China are quite familiar with purchasing things with phone minutes or carrier billing. In fact, in China for a long time, this was how you bought QQ coins. This is how you bought anything with 10 cent, because there wasn't a mass adoption of credit cards or advanced payment methods. So now we've seen a certain type of trading on our exchange where people actually arbitrage their phone minutes. So they use their phone minutes, these prepaid cards, to buy a currency in a game environment that we trade, right? So now they've traded their minutes into a virtual currency. Then they speculate on the exchange, and they wait until the value of the currency has gone up, and then they sell it for real money and they make a profit. So this person apparently, we just use it. They bought the phone minutes. They bought $50 worth of phone minutes. Then they went and bought $48 worth of virtual currency, right? Because people made money off that transaction. And then they waited till the virtual currency value went up on the exchange. The exchange rate became favorable to them, and then they sold out. So then maybe they made, $5, $10. And then if you do this in volume, that could be $5,000 a month to somebody trading in Southeast Asia. 5,000 US dollars. It's not, it's not just something to not pay attention to. So now we've got the mobile payments company who issues this, the virtual goods company, our exchange, potentially another different virtual currency issuer involved in this transaction. So we're seeing sophisticated trading happening with these non-traditional currencies. So really interesting. Facebook credits. I'm going to go really quickly through this because we're running low on time, but I think this deserves kind of its own little portion. So my prediction is that 2012 is going to be the breakout year for Facebook credits. Launched in 2009. It was the first iteration was really used for buying like little items. They just copied 10 cent, right? You could like gift your friend a teddy bear, gift them a flower on their birthday. Only 2% of people on Facebook buy Facebook credits, right? Like very small, 2%. It represents 15% of their revenue. So you can imagine if they double that over the next 18 months to 4%, that is a huge amount of money that they're making off Facebook credits. So this will be the year. How do I think they're going to kind of bring Facebook credits, which will be the first real mainstream virtual currency if you don't consider airline miles and reward points, right? Like, you talk to my dad about Wow Gold, and he's like, I don't even want to know what you're talking about, but he knows what Facebook credits are. Like, he read something in the New York Times about them, and he can relate. So this will be the first mass virtual currency, and I think what they're going to use, methods they're going to use, is on and offline retailers to provide Facebook credits as a loyalty or as a reward point. And so then somebody who's never had Facebook credits is like going to go to the Gap, and they're going to say, okay, you buy $50 worth of clothes, we give you $5 worth of Facebook credits. And they're going to have these credits, and they're going to say, okay, well, how can I use these on Facebook? So they're going to start getting the kind of non-gamer, mass consumer buying virtual currency in the form of Facebook credits. And they're just going to continue to copy 10 cent, where 10 cent's been able to really monetize premium services. I think Facebook will continue to chase after that model. So another major change element that I think is going to affect, is already affecting your business, is definitely going to affect my business, is the changing face of the gamer. So traditionally, the secondary market and trading has always been done by this like hardcore MMO player because they were the ones that cared. But now, if you look at the casual gamer, she's like an older, maybe 26 to 38-year-old female, and she's a more sophisticated consumer. So I'm not trying to like insult like the classic image of the MMO gamer because they're totally sophisticated in their own right. But this player is a more sophisticated consumer. Not only does she now have game currencies that she's accumulated, she also manages the credit card points, she manages the airline miles, she manages she's the CFO of the household. So how is this going to impact the virtual currency trading business that now we have a very sophisticated consumer who has virtual currencies? So I'm going to kind of bring this together and close it out so we have some time for questions. But where is this all going? You know, all of these trends, the fact that the gamer is now kind of a different persona. And the end result of this is that consumers get bombarded with virtual currency in many different types of forms. So this is sort of what it's going to look like and what it's starting to look like, right? I'm your average consumer. I've got a handful of game currencies from games that I play. I've got airline miles, credit card reward points. Now we have gamification across the internet. So non-gaming environments, like just a regular website, I'll use turntable.fm as a quick example. Turntable's a music service where I show up to like a website and I can DJ for my friends and for my non-friends. It's like a virtual environment where you DJ. And if people like my music, they give me thumbs up and I accumulate DJ points. Well, Turntable FM is a community, and status in communities is important, right? This is just a gaming mechanic we're all familiar with, leaderboard. So you can imagine a scenario where like I have 400 DJ points, but my friend has 1,200, and I kind of want to boost my status amongst these people, and I'm like, hey, can I give you $50 for like a couple hundred DJ points? Now you have a secondary market for this new type of currency, which is DJ points. So now you have all of these different types of points, all these different types of currencies, and that is not sustainable, in my opinion. That is not sustainable unless there's transferability and liquidity. So where I think this ends up is that liquidity will enter the market of all types of non-traditional currencies. The first place we saw it, right, was in these virtual economies that issued currency. We saw these secondary markets arise, but I think that liquidity will enter the market for all different types of virtual currencies. So it won't just be the games anymore. You know, Groupon will issue Groupon dollars. They have an exchange rate. Someone might have, 10 Groupon dollars. They need 15 to get some type of product. There'll be a secondary market that arises for that. Airline miles, this dwarfs the virtual currency business. I mean, globally, virtual currency, the primary market is estimated to be about $10 to $15 billion. $60 to $80 billion a year is the loyalty business. There's over $20 trillion worth of airline miles issued, and there's zero liquidity in that market. So I think if you're looking at a trend, often we see games predict certain user behavior on the internet. The gamer is often kind of the early adopter. They drive behavior. Gamification has affected sites that have nothing to do with gaming, and the secondary market is a part of that. So what I think you're going to see happen is that users, as they become more sophisticated, are going to say, not only do I want to be able to sell my game currency, I want to be able to sell my airline miles and my DJ points and whatever else points someone decided to issue. So that's kind of where I'm going to end it because I'm already over time, but definitely want to have a chance to answer any questions if you have them. So.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.